Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, ATO Audio. Thanks for tuning in today. I think we got a rare treat for you guys. We're continuing on this Pioneer SX838, but what we're going to talk about today, guys, is kind of a bonus track. So something I didn't think I was going to be talking about with this receiver, but the opportunity presented itself, so I want to make sure I share that, guys, with you. And so after you guys saw me work on the power supply section and get that board updated and ready to rock and roll and saw that the receiver worked, I decided to try the FM side of things, and it didn't work. And so I had to turn the volume way up in order to hear any FM signal at all. And it was really blotchy, patchy, didn't sound good at all. So the first thing I thought of, guys, was these switches up front. They're notorious for causing signal issues, and I was like, so I exercised the FM switch, but that didn't do it. So then I knew that I had a bigger problem that I was going to have to investigate a little bit deeper. And so I didn't film the repair that I did on this, guys, but the value I want to give to you guys today is what my thought process or rationale was to troubleshoot this unit. And so I think a lot of times as creators, when we're creating this content for you guys, we focus in on what we did, show you what we did, and we move on. But we don't really spend a lot of time with our thought process on how we diagnose and fix things. And so today I kind of want to talk about what I did to troubleshoot this stereo. And so why don't you guys come in a little bit closer, and we'll go ahead and flip this receiver and we'll start walking through what my troubleshooting process was like. All right, guys, so now that we have this unit flipped over, you guys can get a better view. I'm going to try to do my best to put pictures up on the screen, guys, so that you guys can follow along with me, and hopefully it makes sense what I'm talking about. So let's talk about what the problem is. So the problem is with this receiver, the FM signal is very, very low. We have to turn the volume way up in order to get an FM noise from the FM or music from the FM. So something's going on there. So we know that. We also know that all of our other inputs work. So that means that the amp board is working fine, the power supply, everything we've already fixed, we know that's working. So the only issue we're having is with the FM. So that information by itself kind of helps us maybe focus in on what the problem is. So the tuner board is right here behind all this here. And so the reason we're starting out here is basically simple. To get to this tuner board, it is a pain in the butt. So I wanted to exhaust all other options before I even tried to attempt to take this out. Now, I knew going into it that the chances are it being something else was slim, and I was kind of just wasting time and hoping that it was not that, because everything else pointed to that based on what we already talked about already as far as it only being signal that issue. But then I thought, well, maybe it could be a resistor in the path of where it comes into the this board here, or maybe something else is going on. Anything but me having to reply or take out that tuner board. So I want to show you guys what I did to kind of narrow down that problem. So I'm going to put a picture up on the screen now of the back of this tuner board. And so the FM signal, guys, comes out of these pins here and goes into this orange wire and then comes into this tone control board. So we have our left and our right channels here. Once that signal goes through the tone section and the volume and all that good stuff. Actually, this is a tone section here, I'm sorry. This is the volume and the balance tape section. Once it goes through that, it exits here on these two channels here, this pin 27 and pin 28. From there, it comes back around and comes into the receiver here and here. This is our tone board. Once it leaves the tone board, it exits out of these two pins here. And that's ours. That board below is the board that has the low and high filter and the muting section. From there, it exits and it goes basically to our preamp out and main amp in and goes into our amp board. So we know all that's working, right? Because our other signals are not getting lost there. But what I didn't know is if maybe the FM, the switch in here, where the trace is, etc., was not working. So I actually did a couple things. I tried to hook up a scope to it, guys, to trace the signal, and really I didn't get very far with that because the signal seemed like it was fine. I won't say fine because I didn't really have anything to base that off of other than I could just follow the signal, and there was a signal through everything. So what I wanted to do, guys, was start eliminating some of these boards to see if maybe after eliminating one of the boards, the sound came back and the volume was normal. So something that you guys can do is just get some wires with alligator clips on them. And what I did was I hooked those to these terminals on the left and right channel where it comes out of the tuner board. And so I wanted to make sure there was no breaks in this wire. So then I just clipped them to the left and right channel on our volume control board here. Turned on the receiver and it didn't make any change whatsoever. So no problem in that wiring. So from there, guys, I wanted to eliminate this board here. So then I came over here and jumped it to pins 27 and 28. Thus eliminating this board altogether. Still no change in the signal or the sound. So then I wanted to eliminate that wiring. So then I came to pin 7 and 1 on this board, the tone control board, thus eliminating the wiring, the board, and the wiring to this board. Still no change. From there, guys, I knew everything else worked because there really wasn't anything else after this that everything else didn't go through. So, like I said, this was kind of a Hail Mary just to prevent me from having to take this board out. So once I did all that, guys, and I was pretty confident that the problem lied on the tuner board itself, I had to start looking at the tuner board. So, which means going to the schematic and looking at voltages with my multimeter. So I'm going to flip this over, guys, and we'll continue with the troubleshooting on the other side. All right, guys, so after eliminating everything else, I back at the tuner board. And so as I've mentioned a few times, I did not want to have to take this out, but after eliminating everything else, it was time to get my multimeter out and start checking voltages. So in the FM circuit, guys, you really have a couple different transistors, a bunch of capacitors, and a couple IC chips. And so on the schematic, and I'll throw a picture of it up here, it has a bunch of voltages on there that I could check. So I started to do that. And so the first thing I did, guys, was start to check these two transistors here. And I know you can't see it on the camera, so I'll try to put a picture up. And I checked the voltages on the base, the emitter, and the collector, and those are actually right on the money. So I moved it further back and checked voltages on these next two transistors, and they looked fine as well. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Then I checked voltages on this IC chip, this HA1156, and nothing really jumped out at me there either. So the next thing I did was check out this chip here, this HA1137, and when I got to pin 12, there was no voltage on it, and it was supposed to be, I think, 4.2 volts, but there was nothing. So then I went to look and see what that pin controlled, and that pin goes to 21 over here on the board here, and it goes to the muting, FM muting function of the stereo. And after looking at that, I realized that pin 5 over here connected to pin 4 on this IC chip, and it also went, so it basically made a circuit. When it was complete, it would either turn on or off the muting for FM, and there was no voltage on that. So then I went to the switch itself, pictured here, and I checked the voltage on those as well, and I wasn't getting any voltage on those as well. So I knew the problem had to be either with this chip or something that is coming off one of those pins that was not allowing the current or the voltage to go to this chip. So the first thing I started to do, it was look, and I quickly saw that this capacitor that was here and this resistor was in line with that. There's also a couple capacitors and resistors on this side of the board that was in line. And so unfortunately it was now time to take out this tuner board. So I basically had to come from the back and untwist all the wires because I couldn't really get a soldering iron to take out the pins back here. So I untwisted all the wires on the board itself, which gave me access to flip this board up and start unsoldering components on the back. So I did that, and I tested this resistor, and I tested this capacitor. The capacitor was a little off, but nothing major. I tested the capacitor and resistors over here that was on the circuit. Again, nothing major. But then as I was doing that, I noticed this capacitor here. And it actually looked like this when I was in there. And so when I went to go look at that capacitor, it just fell off in my hand. One of the legs had completely come out of the capacitor. So I took that capacitor out and I looked at it, and I realized I've never seen this manufactured before in these Pioneers. You know, maybe I have and I just don't remember, but I've never seen this before. So this capacitor was bad, and wasn't sure if that was the only one that was bad, so I took it out. Well, then I looked on the board and there was another one exactly like it. So I went and looked at that capacitor. As soon as I touched it, guess what? Same thing. The leg fell off. So I went ahead and replaced that one. And then I noticed that there was 3 other capacitors made by that same manufacturer on the board. And so I pulled those out, checked each of those. Those were actually all good, but because they were from that same manufacturer, I went ahead and swapped them out anyways. So I'm assuming those 2 capacitors were from the same batch and faulty, or just not a good capacitor, maybe just not as good quality, I don't know. But I replaced them anyways. Then while I was behind this, I looked at this soldering points on this chip, and I noticed one looked a little suspicious, so I went ahead and hit it with some fresh solder and whatnot. So I guess I point that out, guys, to let you know that sometimes you're going to look at these circuits, and I wish I could tell you that I looked at the circuit and I was able to go directly to that capacitor and realize that was the problem. But sometimes, guys, you're just going to have to be an investigator and just look around and just see what you see as you're taking and checking components out. Because me bumping into that capacitor was really just coincidental. It was a pure accident. Yeah, I was in the area checking things, and I probably would have checked that one as well. But sometimes you just don't know, and you just have to look. And if I didn't look and figure out that capacitor was bad, I probably wouldn't have looked at the other one either. So I say that to say, guys, that you don't have to have super fancy equipment to do a little bit of detective work. A multimeter will get you a long way if you know how to use it. And just some time and patience, and just kind of using some critical thinking skills to figure out how you can eliminate different things. So anyways, after doing that and getting the new capacitor soldered in, I think I changed maybe 5 or 6 capacitors on the board. All the resistors that I checked that were in line with that chip were fine. It was time to put it all back together. Now, did I mention that taking this board out was a pain in the butt? So when I started thinking about how to put this back together, I was like, man, is there any way I could test this without putting it back together? And I really couldn't come up with a way that I was satisfied to test this board without putting it all back together. So unfortunately, I had to put everything back together before I could test it. And so I was really hoping that I had, with all those things that I saw, that I had identified this problem. So I put it all back together, and when I did that, I started getting the voltage on those pins that I needed. And I was also getting the voltage on the FM muting switch as well. So I turned on the FM, and guess what? FM works. Works like a charm, no problems. So I know this was probably a long video, guys, and a lot of me talking, but I really wanted to take this opportunity to show you guys kind of my thought process and rationale to troubleshooting problems you may run into. There's not going to be a YouTube video for every unique situation that you're going to run into with these circuits. You know, whether that be on the tuner board, the FM, the amp board, protection board, power supply board. So you're just going to have to do your best to troubleshoot, and using that thought process to how you can eliminate different variables and then narrow down to where you get into the area to where you can find the culprit. So I hope you guys found a value out of this, guys. I hope you were able to follow my thought process and my rationale and how I troubleshooted this to find the problem. Again, I wasn't planning on doing this video. It just kind of happened. So I really thought it would hold value for you guys. So if you guys found value out and you like this kind of explanation on why I do what I do or how I track down problems, make sure to give me some feedback in the comments below to let me know to continue to make that kind of video for you. So as always, guys, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next video.